Hello and welcome to the Ecomodernist channel live. This is Gabe Ignetti. I'm in here for Carl Pauls today, and we're speaking with a special guest. Guillaume Pitron is a French journalist, attorney, author, and director living in Paris, which I would love to go back to. It's such a great city. He has written many best-selling books and authored 10 documentaries for French television and in around 20 countries. He's produced 100 reports in and around 40 countries on the conditions of extractions of rare earth, and his work has been rewarded with 30 French prizes, as well as others. Guillaume is regularly invited to speak at international institutions such as the IMF, European Commission, United Nations, and many universities, and he's done a TED Talk. And he's been on much of the major media. So we have a heavy hitter here. Guillaume, I hope I said it right. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Okay. So let's get right into it and talk about your book, Rare Earth Metals War, The Dark Side of Clean Energy. And it has been described by you as a ticking time bomb. What exactly do you mean by that?
We are in the fascinating world right now where we are trying to move away from fossil fuels and want to replace them by green technologies, solar panels, wind turbines, batteries for electric cars. And we have no real idea about the fact that to make these technologies possible, we have to dig deeper in the ground. If you want to manufacture these technologies, you have to extract minerals from the ground in order to manufacture steel for solar panels. If you want to manufacture an electric car, you need to extract graphite, lithium, cobalt, copper for the electric car. And this comes at a cost for the environment, which nobody's really aware of. And this cost is not necessarily a CO2 cost, the type of ecological impacts. It's soil artificialization, it is impact on diversity, impact on the quality of waters, impact on human health. Some situations that I've personally experienced as a reporter all around the world, especially in China. So this is obviously a new challenge to get these resources out of the ground in order to make the energy transition possible. And time is running because we are accelerating the energy transition. We want to accelerate it. And on the other hand, can't just take a resource out of the ground like this. You know, the mining time is a long time. And so this is a time race that we are facing now if you want to make the energy transition possible, if you want to extract the resources for the energy transition.
So how dirty are these minerals?
Everything comes at a cost. Whenever we talk about mining and the refining of a mineral to obtain a metal, that comes at a cost. It is the various costs of resource extraction, including artificialization of soils, including impacts on biodiversity, on waters. It can have impacts on ocean ecosystems whenever you have a mine close to the coast and where the dumpings are just being directly made into the ocean, such as nickel mining in Indonesia, for example. So it comes at a cost, and it can be a huge cost in countries where there is no social regulations, where there is no environmental regulations, or where these regulations do exist but are not enforced because you have no police, or or where the power is weak, and that comes at a higher cost than if we were mining in the United States, for example, or in France. I still prefer to mine a resource in order to manufacture an electric car rather than using an oil car, because we know the CO2 impacts and impacts on global warming of using coal and oil. So the impacts in terms of global warming for mining and for manufacturing the green technologies is less than oil and gas technologies, but still cost is unsustainable. If we all want to live the same way we want to live right now, using the same type of cars, having the same conditions of living, we in the West, including here Indians, Indonesians, Chinese, Brazilians, South Africans, we want to have the same kind of living as us.
Yeah.
And turning green for 8, 9, 10 billion people with the impacts on the planet of being green for so many people who want to lift up their level of living, given the way we do mine today these resources, given the way we do manufacture the green technologies, is very much certainly unsustainable.
But it is cleanable to a degree. I'm sure they could do it better. I mean, how much better can they do it in terms of having it done cleanly?
We are at the very beginning of this green revolution, and we're just starting with a set of technologies which are evolving. So in a way, there is a revolution into the revolution. That means that we can do better in terms of mining. We are starting to understand the reality of the mining impact of manufacturing green technologies. So consumers in the West, more and more, there is a certain respect of social and environmental and governance regulations wherever mining activities take place. And countries buying the resources, such as France or the United States, because we mostly get the resources from producing countries far away from where we are, our countries are setting standards, what we call ESG standards, in order to lift up the level of requirement for extraction and refining, so that a car, whenever it gets out of the manufactory, an electric car, actually is less dirty than what it can be if you just mine in a poor way. Say the potential for doing better is really very, very, very high. You can obviously start by assessing before you mine what will be the impact. You can make sure that the waste from the mining are being treated in a responsible way. You can make sure that the electricity for extracting and refining the resource is rather a green electricity rather than coal electricity, coal-made electricity, so that lowers the greenhouse gas emissions of the production of the metal. You can insist upon the fact that there needs to be a post-mine strategy. That means once we have finished extracting, what do we do? Do we just leave a big hole and we forget about it? As a mining company, have a responsibility to actually ensure that, or we're going to do something with this area. So all these questions are more and more taken into consideration in order to make better the mining activities and the refining activities. So I think we are in that way in going to the right direction, because people are more conscious about it.
What can we look at in terms of maybe storing the mining waste or reusing it?
Well, it's hard to tell you, because I'm not a mining expert sufficiently to tell you precisely what would be done out of the waste from the mining. But yes, the circular economy starts with recycling the waste. It starts with recycling the water from the mine. For example, in Chile, you have a copper mine whose name is Chuquicamata. It is the biggest open pit copper mine in the world. And Chuquicamata uses every second 2,000 liters of water. Good news, 70% of this water is being recycled. So basically you see here that the water becomes a waste from the mine, because using this water for treating the mineral, well, it ends up being loaded with heavy metals and chemicals. But if you treat it before reusing it, and if you don't use it anymore, and if you just reject it in the nature once it's being treated, well, obviously, mining comes at a lesser impact for the environment and also for the human health. And let's not even talk about the recycling of the product when it comes at the end of its life. Recycling a phone, or recycling a car, or recycling an electrical object, obviously is necessary, because if you do recycle the metal which is in the battery of your phone, you don't need to go back to the mine to extract the same amount of metal. So this is where what we call the secondary material, which comes from recycling, must progressively work as a substitute of the primary material, which comes from the mine. So we shouldn't forget the end of life of a product, because that's also a way, indirectly, to actually take into account the responsible mining at the beginning of the process.
You said about being unsustainable. I mean, do you consider 100% renewable, or even close to that, as being feasible? I don't, and I'm not knocking renewables here. I think you need an all of the above approach. But I know that takes a lot of mining. Is that real?
Mm-hmm. It's a difficult question to answer. Basically, what we have to look is the resources, so the availability of the resources. To what extent are the resources of such or such a metal critical? Basically, some metals for the energy transition are very much abundant. That's true about iron, for example. But some others are less abundant, for example, cobalt. And basically, some estimations consider that if we want to develop clean technologies in a way that enables to respect the 2-degree scenario, by 2050, we will have consumed 80% or close to 80% of the resources of cobalt. So that is a question, because respecting a 2-degree scenario doesn't mean being 100% renewable energy. I don't know to what extent in the electricity mix of 2050 would green technology represent, but that is far from 100%. So if you want to push that goal to 100%, that's probably not feasible to get access to sufficient resources of certain metals as we use them today. So this is a reality. No, there is another reality, which is, we want to extract in the West the metals in a more ethical way. More and more regulations are coming in order to respect environmental regulations, social regulations, governance regulations associated with mining. But if you want to respect all these regulations, that comes at a cost for the metal. And that also comes with more difficulties for a mining industry or a manufacturer to make sure that it can get a ethical metal. Basically, the metal may be available, but the metal, the way it's been extracted and refined, doesn't comply with regulations. So in theory, you have the metal. In practice, you can't buy this metal because otherwise you don't respect ESG regulations. So that comes at a limitation for the possibility to get access to specific resources in the future. And if you want to make green technologies in a sustainable way, more and more regulations are going to impair the production of metals. So I very much doubt about the situation where we will have sufficient resources and just sufficient metal available, mined in an ethical way, in order to come up with such a scenario. Obviously, the future will be manifold, as you guessed. There will be nuclear, there will be oil, there will be coal, there will be green technologies. It will be a mix of everything.
Yeah, it would have to be. Rare earth mining, how bad is that?
What I've seen personally is rare earth mining and refining. I've experienced both, especially the refining part in China. I've been several parts as journalist to Baotou, which is a capital city for the refining of rare earths in Inner Mongolia, in the northwest of China. And northeast part of China, sorry. And what I've seen was just amazing. That was hell, to be very honest. I mean, the refining was made in an ethical way. The water from the treatment was just dumped into the nature without any treatment, with all the heavy metals. Actually, it still is today, with all the heavy metals and the chemicals. We talk about cancer villages around these refining areas because people die of cancers at a rate which is more than the average. Non-responsible refining companies just doing whatever they want without respecting any regulations. What I've seen was absolutely amazing. But rare earth is one of the worst things that I've seen.
Yeah, I've seen that. And they got I think it's called Lake Batu in Mongolia. I don't know if you've been there.
It's the city of Baotou. That's what I've said. In Inner Mongolia. Yeah, this is where that happens. It's not the only place where the rare earths are being refined and extracted. There are other places in Burma, in the southern parts of China, in the Jiangxi province. Rare earths are being extracted in the United States, but they're mostly being refined in China, those which are being extracted in the United States. But you also have extraction and refining plants in Malaysia, Australia. What happens in China is probably the worst because regulations are probably existent, but just not applied.
It says in your biography that you work to question the stories of utopias accompanying current technological development. So what is your alternative vision for the future?
I live the present, and I abide by modern technologies, obviously. That being said, I hardly believe in a message where technologies are going to solve all the problems that we're facing. And that is a nuanced position that I'm taking here. Obviously, I claim for more technologies in many ways, and I'm the first to recognize how much technologies have been absolutely necessary for developing the way that we have today. Obviously, especially in the health sector, to just mention this one. That being said, my experience as a journalist, as a reporter, who's not on the business side, I've chosen a position to be more an observer of that, and I've come with my work for the last 10 years. I've worked 2 books. The first one is The Rare Metals War. The second is A Dark Cloud. on the cost of turning virtual comes at a cost for the environment. And that has made me realize that every technology, solves issues and brings to the table new issues.
Yeah.
And the challenges of a new technologies that a new technology brings are as formidable, as huge as the challenges it is meant to overcome. That's the philosophy that I have today, coming out of my observation of the field. And that's, for example, exactly the case with rare metals. Once again, it's good to move away from oil as much as we can, because it's going to take time, and to replace our modern technologies, today's technologies, by green technologies. But that means new ecological issues, which are not necessarily CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions, but new issues which could make all these things unsustainable if we don't mine in a responsible way. That means dependencies upon China and other countries producing the resources. China produces the metals for the energy transition. Indonesia does the same. Philippines, Brazil, Russia, South Africa, the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it means new economic dependencies. There is a new geopolitics coming for rare earths and for rare metals. Where are we going to get the resources in the future? What is going to be the geopolitics of turning green? Because we're going to have to throw our efforts into our quest for this new oil, in a way. Metals are the new oil for green technologies. All the challenges of the oil world are being just shifted. They're not being solved. They're shifted to the green world. So that's why, getting back to your question, I want to question this beautiful and wonderful message that technologies could solve any issue. And I think this is a bit more complex than that. I mean, I don't want to just receive this message as a consumer. If I'm a citizen, if I bring some nuance and thinking in this, I have to recognize that a technology is not good or barred or neutral. New technology, and any technology, is ambiguous because it is what we are going to do out of it. And this is where I try to put my message, to say, let's move with these new developments. Let's live with our times. Let's get AI. Let's get green technologies. Let's get all these new technologies. But how do you use it now? And these questions of how do you abide with these technologies? What kind of views do you make of this? How do you bring the presence of these technologies with thinkings on your consumption habits is most of the time something, in my view, which is not really addressed. And I think this is where we also need to look. So I try to question all these.
What you're basically saying, this is a problem. So, it's like, in a way, that we don't know if we're going to have a solution, like in terms of planetary resources. Will we be able to square that circle? I'm hoping that ultimately we will, we will be able to move mining and manufacturing to space far into the future, maybe not that far. And that, I've had people on our show. I mean, it's not as wild as it might sound, because I know you could, yourself. I mean, it takes decades to put in, to produce a mine from scratch. And so, what do you feel about not that, but how do you feel about our squaring the circle of being able to have enough planetary resources to prosper? And
Yeah. In fact, it's more than just having sufficient resources, in my view. It's not just only about, oh, okay, I have 1 gram remaining. I can just, mine this last gram. How do you make your world livable in such conditions? The question goes farther than just, having available resources. Is what do you do with the earth in these conditions? But my message is that a low carbon world is a high metals world, and a low carbon world is a high resource world. We need more metals to emit less CO2. So what you get on the one hand, what your gain, you lose it on the other end, because once again, more metals for making green technologies comparing to other types of technologies. The good news with this is that once you reproduce a metal rather than a sip of oil, you just use it once. You can't reuse it, right?
Right.
When you want to burn coal, it's burnt. You can't reuse it. But once you produce 1 kg of nickel, which you put in your car, at the end of the life of your car, you still have this kg of nickel. You haven't burnt it. It's still available. It's still tangible. And this is the good news with the energy transition. This is that there is a lot of room for recycling. And in this low carbon world, but high metals world, there is a huge potential and a huge necessity, a requirement for recycling, because we need to come up with a low carbon world and a low resource world if we want to make it sustainable. So one way to answer your question is to say, but basically I'm going to develop a circular economy. And circular economy goes way farther than just recycling. It starts with responsible mining, because if you already treat the waste, as we mentioned before, at the stage of mining, already you can reduce the material impact of the mine. If you recycle the water, basically you reduce the material impact of mining. But then you have to think about design your technologies in a way that make them more recyclable in the future. That's what we call ethical design. You have to design it in an ethical way, so that
Yes.
at the end of the life of a phone, basically you can separate the components of the phone and make it more easily recyclable. After that, you have to think about collecting the resource when it is coming at the end of its life. So how do you organize networks of recollection of the resource that you bring together in order to massively treat the waste? How do you make sure that the company collecting the resource will actually find someone who's going to be interested in buying the resource when it is recycled, and to bring back the resource at the end of its life? So you need to organize patterns of collaboration between companies. How do you change business models? For example, if I don't need a car all the time, why don't I just rent the car? That's what we call the service economy. So basically, we're going to be 5 people using the same car, because I realize that I just need my car 20% of my time. And as you may know, your car remains at the parking 90% or 95% of its life. So if we share, the sharing economy may help using less resources, because you don't need to produce as many cars as in the past. What about repairing? How do you make sure that you can, repair and make a product live longer? And at the very end of the process, how do you recycle? But the circular economy, it is 7 sets of actions all around the loop that, from the first chapter to the last chapter, help enable using at every step of the loop, enable to use less resources. If we can develop the circular economy in such a way that actually we can use more and more and more of the resources, then I think maybe the green world may be sustainable, because we might be able to come up with a low carbon world, but also a low resource world, because we will not go back to the mine, we will go back to the recycler more and more. So this is all the stake, all the challenge that the green economy and the politicians are trying to face. It is to accelerate the circular economy, because you can't make the green world if you don't make the circular world happen at the same time. So what you see, Gabe, is that we're facing 2 revolutions. We need to become green, but we also need to become circular. And the circular revolution is probably much harder to realize than the green revolution. I think it's going to be much harder to come up with a collaborative world where every company will speak to each other and say, oh, I have 1 gram of metal here, you should use it. I mean, think about it. I mean, you have a recycler, and has he ever been to talk to the designer of an iPhone and say, hey, think about my job in 15 years. Design your iPhone in such a way that I have a business in 15 years. These people just don't even know each other. They've never spoken to each other. So if you want to make the recycling economy possible, the circular economy possible, you have to make humans collaborate. This is a collaborative economy. This is a reticular economy, a network economy. And this is going to be very hard to develop. So you see all the challenges that it's a very fascinating world coming ahead, by the way, but all these new challenges that we're facing if we want to make all these things sustainable.
Yeah, and it's so counterintuitive to the political thought nowadays that we hear in the mainstream media. I mean, that's a political problem too. I mean, this is like everything else. I mean, it's like getting the political will I mean, how do you get the political will for that?
It's difficult because you know, uh, the green world comes with huge challenges. It comes also with a challenge to make clean technologies more affordable than oil technologies or technologies using oil. Think about the cost of an EV. It's today very expensive comparing to an oil car. So I would say that uh, b- b- I don't know how to answer your question, but
Well, you know what? I mean, in terms of the EV, I mean, if you extended the loans, that if we extended them out further than for a normal car, a regular car, I mean, that would seem to solve it. And I don't understand why they don't do that. I mean, because EV is is a long-term investment, right? Compared to it should be seen that way compared to an ICE, regular automobile, right? I mean, it should be treated that way financially as well, wouldn't you say?
yeah, we could think about that, and we'll have these EVs anyway, more and more available in the market. And if it's not US made or European made EVs, that's going to be Chinese EVs, because we're going to have, we're already having some very, famous brands. I'm thinking about BYD. BYD is a Chinese brand, which
Yeah,
means build your dreams, and that is one of the biggest EV manufacturer in the world. And these cars are today available in the Western markets, uh, unless protectionist measures are being taken by states in order
I
to.
know.
And that's being made by the way by the Biden administration. As you may be aware, a few days ago, Joe Biden said that he would personal tax
100% tariff, 100% tariff on EVs.
tariffs on EVs from China. So that's a way also to make the EV US made market, US made EVs more competitive on the US market. But if that doesn't happen, also the EVs from China are much less expensive. So you
I
can
know.
also expect to have more buying power for US consumers and European consumers with such kind of cars. The Chinese just obviously do it better.
I just shake my head about that. I mean, it's so hypocritical to be talking about like we want to do something about the climate and then, keeping cheaper EVs away from the American people. If you're worried about American jobs, just work out some kind of a deal and bring in the Chinese plants, just like they bring in VW plants and Mercedes plants into the United States,
But
But
the Biden administration is very much active on that. I mean, they've been passing the Inflation Reduction Act, and basically that is, as you know, financial help from the state up to $7,500 for one car, which is being manufactured in the United States, and the materials into the car must, for some of them, it depends. There are some thresholds, but come from either the United States or commercial partners from the United States. But in order to bring back the production of EVs on the US market, that's a way to actually catch up the delays that the United States and the European Union has, to name only these two areas of the world comparing to China. China has been starting this green revolution 20 years before. They have the resources, they have the know-how, they manufacture the batteries, and they make the cars. They manufacture more than half of the cars today in the world. That is huge. And so the Biden administration has been very much reactive in this way in order to catch up that delay. We're so far away behind China because we are 20 years late. That delay may not be caught up in the short-term future.
I don't understand how this works because both the United States and China are part of the World Trade Organization, and that does seem to be a gross violation of the treaties that they have around that.
I think the WTO is dead. I mean, in an informal way here, but it's been a while since many of the regulations that we have agreed upon at the birth of the WTO are just non-respected by everyone, the United States, but also China. And think about, for example, going back to the critical metal space. Indonesia is the first producer of nickel, and nickel is such an important piece of metal for the energy transition, because you need nickel for batteries. Actually, Elon Musk needs nickel, and when he says so, when he tweets, he said, "I need spice." Long Life from the Dune novel. He makes a reference to to Herbert's novel Dune and the spies. But basically, the nickel is so important that Indonesia produces the nickel, extracts it, and tries to keep to go down the value chain as much as it can, which means that we European countries are not able to buy the mineral. We're only able to buy the metal once it's being refined. But that comes ahead of the WTO regulations, because according to WTO rules, we would be supposed, we in the West, to buy the mineral and to refine it on our territory. And the Indonesia says, oh no, we don't care. And Indonesian authorities have been coming to the Davos summit recently, and one of the ministries said officially, we don't care. I mean, we need to go down our own value chain. We want to create jobs for the Indonesians out of our resources. We just don't want to sell the resources €1 or $1, and you're going to make the biggest added value out of it thanks to your refining manufacturers in the United States. And what they say is pretty much logical. I mean, think about this way. I mean, why do we like France? It's not because we sell grapes. It's because we sell wines.
Yeah.
So, we have transformed the product, and by no way we would be interested in selling the grapes. We want to sell the wine. So we want to sell the transformed product, and into this transformed product, there is my knowledge and there is added value. And the Indonesians want to do the same, but they don't probably respect the WTO regulations, and they've been actually sanctioned. There's been some sanctions by the WTO in that respect, and but these rules are not being respected because maybe we're coming into more like a nationalistic world, and where resource nationalism is getting more and more true, and that has to do with also anti-colonialism ways of thinking in these countries. We have taken so much out of them for the past centuries, and in a way they just don't want the history to repeat itself, where we're just going to go to Indonesia, take the raw materials and get rich out of it while they remain poor. They want to change that way of thinking. They want to change these rules. So resource nationalism is a parameter to take into consideration if we want to get a glimpse at what will be the geopolitics of the energy transition in the future. That's not going to be an easy task, and that's not going to be an easy task for us.
Really, it's made for corporations. It's not made to protect workers' rights, the environments, and everything. But you need some kind of international thing like the WTO, or perhaps a reformed WTO, or just redone the WTO, whatever. But you need international governance, I would think, in order to achieve what you're talking about, right?
Probably yes, and I'm not an expert on the WTO, so I don't want to take the risk of going further into this. But obviously, happy globalization is probably behind us, and we're probably coming into an age where there will be more tensions, and trade tensions will also reflect geopolitical tensions in the future, and that will probably also reorganize the flows of raw materials and of critical metals. Until now, these resources could flow in whichever way. But today we see countries such as the United States developing some policies of free sharing, which means we are rethinking which trade partners we want to deal with, and we want to deal with partners which are considered as being reliable. So we're going to outsource offshore some production of resources, but which countries allies, and we don't want to have anything to say and to do with non-reliable country in the future. So that progressively reorganizes the flows of resources, and we might be in the future where flows may be separated. That may not be possible for everything, because when you think about a microprocessor, it has 60 resources into it in one microprocessor. So if you want to make one microprocessor with just allies or just on your own, it's just impossible. Globalization will always be necessary, even for getting 2 grams of gallium or germanium, which is one of the resources, which is a resource necessary for microprocessor that comes from China. But so for some of the products which are very complex, obviously globalization will always be here. But we might progressively, and I'm talking the future, and I don't know what the future is made of, but we see some attempts to reorganize the trade flows of some resources. And that may come to a situation where some trade flows might be, taking place with China and its partners versus the West and their allies, but they may be separated, including because of ESG standards, which means that the way of producing these resources in the Chinese way may not be compatible with our ethical standards. So we just might not buy them. So we'd have to get away with them and to deal with countries which accepts our norms. But we see this progressive separation of trade flows of raw materials taking place. It's a very long process, but we feel it coming. We've been feeling it coming for the last years.
The circular economy in a nutshell, you said the 7 spokes to it, I guess.
7 pillars of the circular economy.
Yeah, like it got repair, reuse, repair, recycle. Like in just quick one words, or what is the 7?
Oh, okay, I'll start again. Responsible mining is the first. Ethical design is the second. Collection is the third. The fourth is rethinking business models. The fifth is repairing and making the life expectancy of a product last longer. There is recycling, which is the last part, and you have most of the idea of it.
Yeah, I get the idea of it. So just quickly too, we talked about one book. You wrote a lot of it. Could you just tell us it's just real short about your other books?
Well, I wrote The Rare Metals War that was published in the United States. Actually, it's been republished recently into a new version, updated version. So if you want to get the latest developments of the rare metal space, the critical metal space, you can have a look at that. And as I mentioned, I came up to the conclusion that a low carbon world is going to be a high metals world.
Yeah.
And when you look at every prospective study of the quantity of the volumes of resources that we're going to consume in the next decades, these studies may be emanating from the OECD, for example. Basically, every study says pretty much the same. In the future, whether we talk about resource, metals, agricultural resources, energetic resources, we're going to consume more. And in the public debate, I've been coming for the last years the word dematerialization, virtual reality, and also, I'm going to put my paycheck in the cloud. And I came to see my editor and I said, but is there a paradox between the fact that the reality that we're going to be even more of a material and materialistic world, because every study shows that, and all these words claiming that we're just going to do away with the reality of the material world by turning virtual. There is kind of a paradox that I want to address. And I've been writing and published in the United States also a second book, whose name is The Dark Cloud. And the dark cloud is an investigation on the trail of a like. What happens if I send a like from my Facebook account to the Facebook account of someone who's sitting just 2 meters away from where I stand? Where does my data go? And actually, my data doesn't just travel for 2 meters. It goes all around the world. It goes into the internet infrastructures, cables, submarine cables, data centers, satellites, and all this uses electricity and all these kind of things. And so I did an investigation on the trail of a like. So that took me 2 years traveling around the world, going from every place in the world where actually is the infrastructure, the internet infrastructures. That took me to the United States, actually, where in the United States, south of Washington, D.C., on the eastern coast, there is the biggest cloud city in the world. A cloud city is a place where all the data center industry is being gathered. And this data center industry is, among other places, but one of the biggest places in the world is Ashburn, south of Washington, D.C. This is where our data is being stored. So that comes at an energetical cost. And where do you produce the energy for making the data centers work 24/7? On the paradox of turning virtual. And nothing is virtual. Everything comes at a cost. And that's also my main message. Technology isn't as simple as what you think it is. You believe that goes in the air, and that comes at a freaking huge cost that you need to take into consideration.
Yeah, everything happens at a cost, as they say.
Yeah, but look at that, Gabe. When I turn my TV on, that's when I'm not being said. I mean, buy this product. It's simple, really easy, and that will work as a miracle. take that cream for making your face so juvenile. You're going to have such an effect within 48 hours. It's been proven. Get this, and you're going to get 20 years less old in 2 days. I mean, we are so happy, we as consumers, to believe in this. And we are so happy to believe that there is a silver bullet solution that will make all the problems once you get this product. And I'm a capitalist. I live in this world, and I need to make money to make my living, to sell books. But that being said, I just want to question these simple messages. And don't get me wrong, I want this green transition to be done, but I think in a way that it's been offered, claimed, touted as such a simple solution. Get a green car, put a solar panel on your roof, and you're going to save the planet. That's fine. It's just not a technological revolution that we have to go with. It's just not about, accelerating the manufacturing of these technologies and having the buying power to buy them. It's just so simple, and it just doesn't work that way. So in a way, yes, everything comes at a cost. And as a journalist, I just try to address all this and to look into all the challenges behind them.
Before we end our show, is there anything you'd like to add to that, or we're good?
Well, no, I'm happy that you invite me, and thank you for that. I just want to add that I'm on a ridge line in a way, because I'm pro energy transition, but I'm criticizing it. I want the world to turn green, but I'm saying that it comes at a cost, and that may be unsustainable. And I know, and that's true in my country, and that is true in your country, that basically this might be understood as, all right, it just wants to stick with oil and coal, and it's just someone who just doesn't want to do the energy transition. And I know that there are some messages in the Republican Party saying, let's not do with the EVs, let's remain with our oil cars. So my situation has always been difficult, and I've always had to be nuanced, explaining the challenges of this new world coming, but at the same time saying that this new world is necessary. And sometimes a message may have been misunderstood. I may have been seen as not being sincere in my thoughts, in what I'm saying. But so I'm on a ridge line in a way. I'm trying to find a balanced message between all these options that we have ahead of us. And so I'm trying to be as pedagogic as possible in what I explain, hoping that I can, get better understood by the people who listen to us.
Yes, it's very good. And I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure and an honor, because you're such a man of letters. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Hope you'll invite me for my next book.
Yeah. Oh, you have an open invitation. I mean, I got to keep track of all of that. So this has been the Ecomodernist channel live. And we, of course, go every Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, 10 o'clock Pacific. And of course, in Paris, it's a whole other stick. But you can see a show live almost every weekend. So we're over here almost all the time. We're also here live on Soyatl TV. That's like a Seattle, only with soy in the front. Soyatl.tv. And of course, we're on Patreon, and we really need your support. And you could see so much more of what we do on Patreon without commercials. And of course, subscribe if you like us, and ring the bell and all of that good stuff. And so with all of that, I'm going to say emissions first, peace and justice will follow, and everybody have a good week. Please subscribe to us on YouTube, Ecomodernist channel. Also to subscribe to us on Twitter and Facebook, Ecomodernist Society of North America.
And online at https://esna.earth.